The night was alive with energy. A glamorous political gala held in one of Manhattan's most luxurious venues was brimming with celebrities, politicians, and influencers. Flashbulbs erupted, capturing the world's elite in their finest attire. Among them stood Donald Trump Jr., his sharp suit gleaming under the soft lights, playing his part in the grand spectacle. Next to him, former President Donald Trump commanded the room, larger than life, exuding power. But amid the glittering celebration, something raw unfolded. Hidden microphones, part of the event's media setup, captured an unguarded moment between Trump Jr. and a confidant. Their conversation, once casual, turned unexpectedly candid. "I'm tired of pretending," Trump Jr. whispered. "This whole thing, living in his shadow, it's suffocating." His voice, normally confident, carried a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "I can't breathe under the weight of his legacy." Unbeknownst to them, their private words were broadcasted to millions. The recording spread like wildfire, setting off a media frenzy. Headlines screamed, "Trump Jr. slams his father," and "Betrayal at Gala." Trump Jr.'s personal frustration, once meant for only a select few, was now exposed to the world. The public's reaction was immediate and harsh. Supporters of the Trump legacy turned against him, calling him a traitor. Others, however, felt empathy for a man struggling under the weight of his family's expectations. The scandal shattered the father-son bond, and Trump Jr. found himself thrust into a storm, his personal pain now on full display. For Trump Jr., there was no turning back. The world had seen the cracks in his carefully crafted persona, and now he had to face the consequences. Growing up in the spotlight, Donald Trump Jr. had never known life outside his father's towering shadow. The world knew him as Donald Trump's son, and the expectations that came with that title weighed on him like an unyielding burden. The world saw the name, the legacy, the empire. But underneath the tailored suits, the polished public persona, there was a man struggling to define himself beyond a famous last name. As he walked through the familiar halls of the Trump Tower, the echoes of his father's success whispered at him from every corner. Each room, every polished surface, seemed to remind him of the monumental presence his father had built, a presence that consumed every ounce of space in his life. Yet, despite his efforts to carve a path of his own, the pressure never waned. Every choice, every decision, felt weighed down by the legacy his father had created. Was he destined to always live in this shadow? The contrast between Trump Jr.'s private desires and public obligations was increasingly difficult to ignore. In the glitzy world of politics and business, he had managed to create his own reputation, one that was rooted in his family's empire. But it was never enough. The image that everyone expected him to portray was suffocating. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," Trump Jr. confessed to a close friend late one night, sitting across from the glowing skyline of New York. "I'm either following my father's footsteps or I'm failing. There's no middle ground." His friend, a fellow political figure, leaned in, concern etched across his face. "You've got to find your own way, Don. Your father's legacy doesn't have to be your identity." But Trump Jr. couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what direction he went in, the world would always define him as the son of the man who had shaped America's political landscape. Every success he achieved, every deal made or project completed, felt like it was done under the scrutiny of a family legacy that wasn't his own to control. Then came the hot mic incident. What was supposed to be a private conversation became the flashpoint for everything Trump Jr. had been hiding. The media was unforgiving, casting his every word in a negative light. His comments about his father, the criticisms, the raw vulnerability spilled into the public's eye, and the backlash was swift. The headlines hit like a tidal wave. "Trump Jr. betrays family in candid mic moment." "Political heir breaks silence, criticizes his father." In the immediate aftermath, Trump Jr. couldn't escape the crushing guilt that gnawed at him. Was he wrong to speak his truth? Should he have kept quiet, as his father always demanded? Back home, in the silence of his luxurious penthouse, he sank into a chair, the weight of the media frenzy sinking in. "How did it get to this point?" he muttered to himself. The media had branded him a traitor, and his father's loyalists were no better. The pressure to conform to expectations had exploded in his face, leaving him questioning everything about himself. The confrontation came like a storm. Behind closed doors, in the cold and empty space of a private meeting room, Trump Sr. looked at his son with fury in his eyes. His voice was low, but laced with anger. "You've humiliated us. You've humiliated me," he said, pacing back and forth. "Why would you do this? What were you thinking?" Trump Jr. sat still, hands clenched. "I was thinking about how I've never been allowed to be myself. You made me who I am, but you never gave me a chance to be anything else, to have my own voice. You think this is how you find your voice? By airing our family's dirty laundry for the world to feast on?" Trump Sr.'s face reddened, his tone cold and biting. "I was suffocating, Dad. Do you even see that? I never had a chance to breathe under your shadow," Trump Jr. shot back, his voice cracking. The tension between them was palpable, raw. Silence filled the room. Both men stared at each other, the realization settling that this moment, this confrontation, had been inevitable. The father's expectations and the son's personal turmoil had been locked in a battle for too long, and now it had come to a head. After the confrontation, the weight of everything became unbearable. The media continued to scrutinize every part of Trump Jr.'s life, dissecting his actions, his words, his emotions. The constant flood of public opinion, the judgments, the criticisms, it was all too much. Every conversation was tainted with assumptions and whispers. Sitting in his apartment alone one evening, Trump Jr. stared at the floor, the walls of his life closing in. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered into the emptiness of his luxurious yet lonely home. The pressure to succeed, to live up to the legacy, was choking him. He questioned his relationships, his future, everything. The mental strain was taking its toll. Was he trapped in a life that wasn't his to define, or had he lost his way completely, succumbing to a public image that never truly reflected who he was? The cracks were visible now, and the cost of fame had never felt more real. Trump Jr. could no longer ignore the toll it was taking on him, physically, emotionally, and mentally. As the world continued to watch and judge, he faced the hardest decision of his life. Would he continue to carry the weight of his father's empire? Or would he find the courage to walk away and define himself on his own terms? The media frenzy surrounding the hot mic incident had reached a fever pitch. Trump Jr. stood in front of the mirror, his hand trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. The reflection staring back at him was unrecognizable, caught between a persona he had spent years cultivating and the raw vulnerability he'd never shown. Every headline had painted him as a traitor, a disappointment to his father's legacy. The pressure to respond, to explain himself, was unbearable. Behind the scenes, people scurried about, preparing for the press conference. Final checks on microphones, adjusting the lights, ensuring everything was perfect for the moment when he would step into the spotlight. But Trump Jr. could feel the weight of it all, a crushing weight of expectations and public scrutiny. His family's empire, the legacy that had built and shaped him, now felt like a prison. Each second that ticked by felt like an eternity. He could hear his heart pounding in his chest, echoing the demands of the world outside, waiting for him to speak. His father's voice loomed in his mind. "You will fix this. You will make it right." The pressure, the spotlight, the responsibility. He couldn't escape it. His body was here, in this room, but his mind was 1,000 miles away. The moment finally arrived. The stage lights beamed down as Trump Jr. stepped forward, the camera flashing relentlessly. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The microphones in front of him were not just for show. They were the tools that would amplify his every word, every sigh, every tear. As he gripped the microphone, his voice cracked, betraying the emotions that had been building for years. "I've spent my entire life trying to be someone I'm not," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. The audience shifted, sensing the rawness of the moment. "I've lived in the shadow of a man who built an empire, but the cost of that empire was never just his." His eyes met the crowd, but they weren't seeing the son of the former president. They saw a man, broken and vulnerable. "I'm not perfect," he continued, the words spilling out now, "and I've never wanted to be. But the world, the press, my own family, they expect perfection. And I can't carry that anymore." His heart raced as the floodgates opened. All the pent-up frustration, all the years of struggling with who he was, came pouring out. "I love my father, but I've been trapped in his expectations. This life, the power, the legacy, it's all been about him, never about me. He paused, taking a shaky breath, his chest rising and falling with the weight of his words. The crowd, captivated by the emotional rawness, watched as Trump Jr. broke down, his composure slipping entirely. "I'm not a politician, I'm not a brand, I'm a person," he said, finally allowing the truth to surface. "And I'm done pretending." The room fell silent as the camera continued to roll, capturing every word of his confession. The silence felt deafening, as if the weight of his declaration was more than just a personal moment. It was the end of an era for the Trump family. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped, listening to every painful syllable that Trump Jr. had spoken. The media quickly took to social platforms, amplifying his raw vulnerability. The story spread like wildfire, sparking a frenzy. The world was divided. Some people saw a man in pain, trapped by the suffocating grip of his family's legacy, while others called him a traitor. The moment had forever altered the public's perception of Trump Jr., but it also ignited a deeper conversation about fame, expectations, and the cost of success. His admission had shattered the carefully constructed facade that had shielded both him and his father from the harsh light of public scrutiny. The Trump dynasty was no longer invincible. It was human, and for the first time, the public saw the cracks in that perfect image. The confession left the world in turmoil. The media painted a picture of emotional chaos. Some people saw Trump Jr. as a victim of familial pressure, a man trapped under the weight of expectations too heavy for any one person to bear. These voices spoke with empathy, understanding the emotional toll fame had taken on him. Others, however, were unforgiving. "He betrayed his father," the critics shouted. "How dare he air the family's dirty laundry for the world to see?" The backlash was swift, with many fans and political allies of Trump Sr. publicly condemning his son. They saw the admission not as a plea for understanding, but as an unforgivable disloyalty. Trump Jr. was now caught in a media firestorm that threatened to consume him. His private battle, which had been hidden for so long, had become public spectacle. He was torn between the empathy he felt from some and the condemnation from others. His own family, too, seemed split down the middle, some offering support, while others remained silent or turned away. The fallout reached the Trump family quickly. Behind closed doors, the reaction was less forgiving. Former President Trump, though furious, was quiet for a moment. His anger simmered beneath the surface. But the harsh words he had spoken in the press conference were now replaced with an unsettling silence. In a tense moment alone, Trump Sr. finally confronted his son. "You have embarrassed this family," he said, his voice tight. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I had to," Trump Jr. replied, his voice cracked. "I've lived under your shadow my whole life. I'm not you, Dad. I never was. But I can't keep pretending I am." Trump Sr. was speechless for a moment, but a flicker of realization crossed his face. This moment of truth was not just about the public. It was about their relationship. A relationship built on expectations, and never on mutual understanding. And for the first time, both father and son were forced to confront the truth that had been buried beneath their powerful public personas. The future of their relationship was uncertain, but the damage had already been done. In the aftermath of the emotional press conference, the media circus around Trump Jr. reached a fever pitch. Every outlet took its turn at portraying him, some with sympathy, others with scorn. On one screen, he was a man crushed by the overwhelming weight of his father's legacy, barely hanging on to the remnants of his identity. On another, he was branded a disloyal son, a betrayer who had dared to wash the family's dirty laundry for all to see. "Trump Jr. under fire, the disloyal son," screamed one headline. "A man struggling with his father's empire," read another, juxtaposed with others that called him a traitor. His face, once a symbol of confidence, was now plastered on every screen. In every photo, the rawness of his confession seemed to echo. And behind it all, the world watched, waiting for the next move, while Trump Jr. tried to navigate the fallout, his life unraveling in front of millions. The shockwaves from the scandal rippled through the Trump family, dividing them in ways no one had ever anticipated. Former President Trump, furious and hurt, could not hide his anger. "You've betrayed us," he snapped at his son in a private meeting. Everything we've built, and you just throw it away. The public condemned Trump Jr. relentlessly, each word echoing the anger of those who had long followed his father's every move. But behind closed doors, some family members saw things differently. Ivanka, torn between loyalty to her father and love for her brother, took him aside later that evening. "I know you didn't mean to hurt anyone, but you can't erase this, Dawn." Yet even with Ivanka's understanding, the walls between Trump Jr. and the family grew thicker. Eric was silent, his gaze hard when he passed him in the hallway. "You're on your own with this one," Eric muttered, the words sharp as they cut through the strained atmosphere. The family was at a crossroads. Some wanted to repair the damage, while others seemed irrevocably lost in judgment. With every passing moment, the fissures widened. Would healing come from this, or would it deepen the divide? In the chaos of the aftermath, Peter, an old friend from his business days, called late at night. "I get it, man. I really do," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "You were drowning under all that pressure. But you've got to realize, some people won't understand. The press, your dad, they're looking for answers, not empathy." Trump Jr. ran a hand through his hair, feeling the exhaustion sink deep into his bones. "I didn't want to be the villain, Pete. I just wanted to be heard." But not everyone offered kindness. Paul, a fellow political figure, didn't mince words. "This is bigger than you. You've thrown everything away over a moment of weakness. You'll never live this down." Paul's words stung, but there was a sense of truth in them. Trump Jr. closed his eyes, as though hoping the harshness would go away. The words of encouragement and criticism blurred together, leaving Trump Jr. to wrestle with his fractured sense of self. The emotional weight was unbearable, as he realized just how alone he truly felt in the eyes of the public. Who could he trust now? The noise of the world felt suffocating. With the media storm beginning to die down, Trump Jr. retreated from the spotlight. He withdrew to a private space, a mansion far from the prying eyes of the cameras, a place where he could finally breathe without the constant scrutiny. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself a moment of peace. Sitting alone in the vast living room, the weight of the scandal pressing down on him, Trump Jr. reflected on everything that had led to this moment. The anger, the frustration, the constant battle to find himself under his father's shadow. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, eyes lost in the distance. His thoughts circled back to his father, the unsaid expectations, the public persona he was forced to adopt. Could he ever reconcile who he was with who he had been made to be? The isolation was both painful and necessary. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages, but he ignored them, seeking only quiet to sort through the chaos inside his head. In the silence, Trump Jr. was forced to confront the most difficult truths about himself. For years, he had lived for others. His father's success, his family's legacy, the expectations of the public, and in the process had lost himself. He had never been given the chance to explore who he was outside of the label that had been placed on him at birth. "I've been living a lie," he murmured, finally acknowledging it to himself. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the reflection in the glass. The pressure to follow in his father's footsteps, to carry a name that demanded perfection, had left him empty. I wasn't just fighting to be seen, he realized. I was fighting to exist. The weight of that realization hit him hard. Trump Jr. felt a surge of emotion, anger, regret, and a deep sense of loss. But in this moment of clarity, he also felt something else. A flicker of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late to rediscover who he was meant to be. The weight of his emotional turmoil pushed Trump Jr. to reach out. He called Ivanka one evening, his voice softer than usual. "Hi, I need to fix things. With Dad. With everyone. I'm trying to understand what's going on in my head, but I don't know if it's too late." There was a pause on the other end of the line before she spoke. "It's not too late, Dawn, but you have to make the choice to take the first step. I know you're hurting, but you can't do this alone." His throat tightened as he nodded, although she couldn't see him. "I don't know if I can fix what's broken, but I want to try." The conversation ended with a sense of tentative hope, but Trump Jr. knew the road ahead was uncertain. He had already lost so much: respect, family, trust. But he knew that the hardest part was still to come. confronting his father. Would his reconciliation attempt even be enough? He glanced at the phone once more, his finger hovering over the call button to his father. But the moment lingered. It wasn't just the world watching now, it was the truth. And the fear of how his father would respond. Could he truly rebuild? Or would the distance grow too wide to bridge? The emotional fallout from Trump Jr.'s confession left the Trump family fragmented. For the first time, cracks had appeared in the impenetrable facade they had so carefully constructed. His father, despite the public face of anger, remained a constant presence in the background. But there was an unmistakable coldness between them now. Behind the closed doors of the family mansion, the distance between them seemed insurmountable. Yet not all was lost. Ivanka, the sibling who had always been the closest, reached out to him. "I know this isn't easy for anyone," she said gently, her voice soothing. "But Don, I see the weight you've carried. You've always been there for us, and I want to be there for you now." Her words were a balm to the emotional wounds Trump Jr. had carried for years. But while some members of the family rallied behind him, others could not shake the feeling of betrayal. Eric, his brother, remained distant. "You crossed a line," he muttered when they spoke. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way." Despite the tension, Trump Jr. began to realize that perhaps, after all these years of being suffocated under the weight of expectations, the understanding from those who still cared might be enough to slowly rebuild what had been broken. The healing would be slow, but there was hope. Hope he hadn't felt in years. Trump Jr.'s journey towards redemption began quietly. In the weeks that followed the press conference, he started attending therapy, an action he had never considered before. At first, he resisted the idea, unwilling to confront the emotions he had buried for so long. But as he sat across from the therapist, he felt something stir within him, a flicker of recognition that perhaps this was the beginning of something he had long needed. "I've spent my entire life trying to be someone I'm not," he admitted in one session. His voice was fragile, betraying the years of internal conflict. "I've been trying to be my father, trying to fit into this role that was never meant for me. It's like I've been suffocating, and I never realized how much I needed to just be." His therapist nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "That's the first step. Acknowledging that you deserve to be yourself, not a replica of someone else." Every session revealed more about the emotional scars Trump Jr. had carried for years, scarred by the constant demand for perfection and the pressure of following in the monumental footsteps of his father. It was a painful but necessary journey. He had to face the reality of how deeply he had been affected, how much of his identity had been shaped by others. As he worked through his past, he began to see a clearer path forward, one that was his, and his alone. As Trump Jr. continued his journey of introspection and growth, something unexpected began to happen. His openness about his struggles started to resonate with the public. Initially, the press had been unforgiving, but now, as he spoke about the toll fame had taken on him, the emotional burden of constantly being in the public eye, the narrative slowly began to shift. Trump Jr. opens up about his struggles with mental health. One headline read. Another one said, "Is this the most honest Trump Jr. we've ever seen?" The world, divided by his earlier confession, was now confronted with a more vulnerable side of him. For the first time, Trump Jr. was showing his humanity. He spoke about the constant pressure of being under his father's shadow, of carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders. His admission sparked a broader conversation about the mental health challenges faced by those living in the limelight, and people began to empathize with him. "This is about more than just a family scandal," he said in an interview. "It's about the pressure of constantly living up to something, of never feeling like you're enough. But the truth is, I'm learning that it's okay to not have it all figured out. That's part of being human." The shift in public perception was palpable. For the first time, the public saw Trump Jr. not just as the son of a former president, but as a man grappling with the same struggles everyone faces: identity, mental health, and the personal cost of success. The shift in narrative was not just about Trump Jr.'s personal transformation. It was also about redefining what success meant in the public eye. No longer just a political figure or a wealthy heir to a dynasty, Trump Jr. became a symbol of redemption. A man who had confronted his inner demons and was now willing to be honest about his journey. As he continued to speak openly about his experiences, the media began to change its tone. Trump Jr. redefined success from legacy to authenticity, read one of the most sympathetic articles. The press, once so eager to tear him down, was now beginning to appreciate his vulnerability. People admired his willingness to confront the deep-rooted issues that had been stifling him for so long. And more importantly, his story inspired others, particularly those in the public eye, to speak openly about their own struggles with fame, pressure, and identity. His candidness sparked a movement, one that encouraged other celebrities and figures in the limelight to embrace their flaws, be honest about their vulnerabilities, and take a stand against the societal pressures that defined their worth. Trump Jr. in his honesty had begun to redefine success, not as perfection, but as the courage to embrace one's true self. In the final act of his journey, Trump Jr. made a bold decision. He stepped away from the political spotlight. For years he had lived in the shadow of his father's expectations, trying to fill shoes that never truly fit him. But now, he was ready to walk a different path. He had discovered that his worth was not defined by his family name, nor by the public's perception of who he was supposed to be. It was defined by his own actions, his choices, and his authenticity. "I can't keep living for others," he said quietly to Ivanka one evening. "I've spent my entire life trying to make everyone else happy, trying to live up to the name. But I've forgotten about me. I need to find my own way." Ivanka, her voice soft but filled with support, smiled. "You've always been your own person, Dawn. You just had to let yourself believe it." And for the first time, Trump Jr. truly believed it. He began to explore new passions, adventures that weren't tied to his father's legacy or the world's expectations. He found solace in the things that brought him joy, not accolades or attention. His personal freedom became his greatest triumph. As he stepped into this new chapter of his life, Trump Jr. was finally free. Free from the past, free from the weight of family expectations, and free to define his identity on his own terms. As the world watched Trump Jr. struggle in the public eye, his journey became more than just a scandal. It became a powerful lesson about the cost of fame. In the search for perfection, he had lost sight of the most important thing, his own authenticity. The constant pressure to live up to an idealized image had worn him down, stripping him of the chance to be truly himself. The journey was never simple. Fame had demanded everything from him, and in return it had left him with an emptiness that no amount of wealth or prestige could fill. Trump Jr. had been forced to wear a mask for so long, concealing his struggles behind a polished exterior. But in opening up to the world, he had shown that even those living under the brightest spotlight wrestled with the same emotional complexities as anyone else. His public confession had been the turning point. It was an admission of the pain that had been building for years. It was also a call for empathy, a plea for others to understand that behind the dazzling veneer of wealth and success, celebrities too were human, grappling with identity, mental health, and the pressure to be perfect. He had learned that staying true to oneself, even in the face of overwhelming scrutiny, was the true measure of strength. As time passed, Trump Jr.'s transformation became a story of redemption, a slow, painful journey toward self-awareness. He no longer hid behind the walls of expectation. Instead, he embraced his vulnerability, facing his past mistakes with a humility he had never known before. His journey wasn't without its challenges. In the beginning, the weight of public judgment was almost unbearable. The world had painted him as a villain, a disloyal son caught in a scandal. But as he began to speak openly about his struggles, his own truth resonated with others. The very public who once tore him apart now started to understand the human being behind the headlines. "I've spent so long trying to be someone I'm not," Trump Jr. admitted in an exclusive interview months later. "The pressure to be perfect, to meet everyone's expectations, it nearly broke me. But what I've realized is that it's okay to be flawed. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how we grow." His willingness to speak openly, to share his vulnerabilities with the world, not only reshaped public opinion, but also allowed him to reclaim control over his own life. He wasn't defined by the empire his father had built. He wasn't just the heir to a name. He was a man, flawed, imperfect, but capable of learning and growing. As Trump Jr. took this journey towards self-acceptance, he began to understand that true strength didn't lie in trying to live up to other people's standards. It was found in embracing the self, flaws and all. He became a beacon of vulnerability in an industry that often demanded perfection. His story wasn't just about redemption. It was a reminder that personal growth is rooted in the courage to be authentic. And in his newfound authenticity, he found peace. The man who once lived for the approval of others was now finally living for himself. His journey had come full circle, and he was ready to step into the next chapter of his life. One where his worth would no longer be measured by the opinions of the world, but by his own sense of purpose.